name? Oh, thanks, Ruth or whoever set the recording. Sean.
I can do it or Ruth can do it.
Yeah, I already did it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I always forget that. I was looking at Remy is doing some interesting work. He created an issue. Oh, that's the other thing I want to do. Can somebody put our GitHub link in the chat? Or I can do it
Yeah.
later. Let me just check and see though. So Remy created, thanks for joining, Remy. Issue number 6, I think it is, explore creating a cookie cutter.json config. I really like what he's doing here, and it kind of opens a can of worms to me for what would it mean for us to, how would we define a standard so that people can enter into their projects and then have it be searched and discovered as being highly relevant or addressing one or more of the SDGs.
Which is it? One of these issues?
Sorry, it's it's number 6. It's the last one. It's the final, the one on the bottom. Explore creating a cookie cutter JSON.
Issue
Yeah.
1.
So when I had talked to Roberto De Cosmo from Software Heritage, he talked in these kind of terms as well. He actually mentioned the public code.yaml. That's the first reference that Remy brought up. Remy, do you want to talk to this? And you probably gave an update last week and I just missed it. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I didn't read your comments yet, but our team, we've been thinking about this prior to the most recent developments. The reason why it's more relevant now is that the Share IT Act was passed into law on December 23rd. So it is a new piece of legislation, is now law, that says that code that is custom developed by federal agencies needs to be stored in repositories, whether that's by federal employees or by contractors, and that it needs to contain certain metadata for reuse, which is really exciting. We were already really interested in this area and thinking about it. So the standards are still being established. Our team is building out a project proposal now to talk about how we would propose implementing it. But within 180 days or 210 days of the enactment, the various parts of the federal government need to come up with a plan. So we're hoping that we can share our proposed implementation with the community first, to get some feedback from folks like this group and to base it off of standards like the ones that Roberto is pointing at and our friends in Germany and France and Italy, the standards that are being used in the international open source community to do inventory work too. That's the TLDR.
Perfect. I love that. Is that that's an executive order that was signed?
No, it was signed by the president on the 23rd. We'll dig up the link.
So it wasn't one of the things that was signed and then revoked.
No, not an executive order. This was Congress. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. That's great. Now I understand why you're so excited. I was like, didn't this just all go away? But okay, good. This is fantastic. Yeah, so Sean, if you go back to what you were just, oh, never mind. It's right there. You're in the, yeah.
I was off of it for a second. You're not losing your mind.
Oh, I am losing my mind, but that's another story. Remy, what since you've explored this, what are your thoughts on like how to create a standard, and what you think we could do? I realized like, okay, this is a challenge. I think it's our challenge is how do we come up with a standard, you know, if it's a tiny snippet of JSON where somebody can simply put somewhere in their repo something like United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 13, and then an API can go in and search that.
Yep.
And then obviously you maybe want some more details in there, you know, but really just getting that first thing where it's searchable and discoverable that this repo, this project thinks that it's addressing a specific SDG would be of great value. Obviously, getting more details about the targets and the indicators and justifications for how, you know, you're addressing it would be great, but I don't want to like go into the weeds too much because it's already hard enough to figure out, like, are we doing JSON? Are we doing YAML? Are we doing all the above? You know, is it just a markdown readme? How are you thinking about this? And anybody else, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts.
Yeah. So the way we're thinking about it, and I'll try to go through quickly, is code.json is the federal standard that we are already sort of on the hook for. And the standard that is on the outside, that's being used is the public code.yaml, right? And the
What
code
do you mean
meta
on the outside? I mean, that's
outside of the federal government in the international community. Public code.yaml is being used by Germany and Italy and France and some other places. That's how they're doing their code inventory. And then Software Heritage has code meta.json, which is another JSON standard with some information. So the whether or not it's in a YAML format or a JSON format, the way we are approaching it is we have optional fields in our code.json that we're using the same keys as the ones that are in the public code.yaml. So we are looking to harmonize the US standard with the international standard by including the international standards as optional fields in our metadata. And when it comes to harmonizing these things, I think that as long as the keys are the same, whether you're in YAML or JSON, it is relatively straightforward to come up with a conversion tool that will convert between YAML or JSON or CSV or whatever, as long as the information is there. And GSA, we recently discovered that GSA has a tool that says, like, if you want to use YAML, here's a way to do that. If you want to use JSON, here's a way to do that. So we've already seen that pattern in the federal government, but I think for us, because we have federal requirements, we're trying to meet the federal requirements, but we are looking towards the future and saying localization with an S is one of our optional fields because that's the international spelling of it and that's the international metadata. So we are merging the different schemas together and having one big schema. And then if we want to create a tool that can convert that or parse that and then output the things we're looking for, I think that that'll make it so that we can harmonize the standards. That's our approach we're taking right now.
okay. I love that. Trying to enable interoperability as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sense, have you guys done the research on is SDGs or where like the UN SDGs would fit? Are there already fields and schemas that it could or live, or should we create something new in like schema.org, or what are your thoughts on that?
The Digital Public Good Alliance has a standard, and these are the metadata fields that it uses. And they are part of the application for getting a digital public goods designation, and it includes relevance to which sustainable development goal it is. So I think that these are just another set of metadata fields that we add and add those as fields too. So I would say harmonizing with the DPG standard is going to give us that SDG information that we're looking for. You know,
So how does that look in the schema, or is it already mapped to yours, or how, or is this something we need to help do.
Right. So the DPG standard, I believe the DPG projects are supposed to have this metadata. They're at least supposed to attest that they have done this, and then that goes into the DPG website. I don't know if it's a formal metadata file that sits in the repo or not. That's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I think that that would be an elegant way to go about doing it. We just say, take the DPG standard, add it to public code.yaml or codemeta.json or code.json, and just have it be optional fields and harmonize them that way. That's an approach. I don't know if the best one or the correct one, but it's the one that, you know, we're going to try and see what happens. Like,
Does anyone else have
already,
any-
like, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ryan.
A lot of stuff like platform documentation is already in the public code.yaml and the code.json standard. So like some of these things are already contained there. I think if we just give it like a key that makes sense, like DPG-1 or 2 or DPG-clear ownership-platform independence, whatever, like those things could be helpful. But
I don't understand what you're saying. The DPG just clear
Right.
ownership. What does that mean?
So
So the-
when you're looking at this file right here, like go back, Sean,
Okay, this one or this one?
the DPG standard one.
Okay.
Nope, back one more, that one. Do you see how there's this table where it says indicator
Yes.
and then documentation, indicator, platform independence, right? So each one of the indicators could be a key in the metadata, and then the value is whatever the answer is. So for documentation,
Okay.
it will be a link to the documentation. For adherence to privacy and applicable laws, like, you know, maybe we don't need all of these things to be in the metadata. Maybe we just need it to be a link to the digital public good inventory website that says, yep, it checks the boxes. But number one at the top, it's like, which are the relevant sustainable development goals? We've already thought about adding that as like a separate metadata key that's separate from the DPG metadata. We can just say, which sustainable development goals does this potentially relate to? And then we could just list them out. And
So these would
but I
be,
think
I think what,
it's a good idea. Go ahead.
I think what you're saying is that these standards from this file would be name value pairs included within the JSON that is specified over somewhere else.
Yep.
So
Yep.
they'd be like a name value pair inside of something in here, which I don't really know how to find the exact place, but that's basically how JSON works. So like, here's an example, like permissions, and then there'd be these different types of permissions like licenses and names. And so somewhere in this file, we would have name value pairs that reflect these items as relevant. Is that right, Remy?
Correct. Yes. And we have our own, there's our code.json. I'm trying to pull it up. Maybe someone on the team can give me the latest version of our code.json so we can show people what we're talking about. But yeah, that schema is like the general schema. You seeing an example of it, I think, is more helpful. Yeah, I'm
Is
trying
it
to pull up
like this is an example of something, but obviously it's a little hard to read.
Right. So yeah, I'll get you a real code.json to look at in a second. I don't want everyone to block on though.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's
All right.
exciting. I'm a little bit nervous
This-
about doing all of this DPG Alliance fields, but I guess if they're all optional, it's not really a problem.
So Remy, this is your code.json.
Yeah. Yes. This is for the generator. So this generates a code.json file.
Okay.
Have we
So-
filled out a code.json JSON for one of our repos, team? I know we have. Nat
So, and
or
Remy,
Sachin, I think you have some PRs that you just sent out, right? Thank you, Sachin. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
so yeah, so this form, if I'm understanding what's happening correctly, Remy's team has developed this form, and this form reads the values that it needs to generate from this schema JSON,
Right.
but it's not actually
So, Sean, if you go
populating
back
the
to that,
values.
right. If you go back to that form, imagine there's a field in this form that says, which UN Sustainable Development Goals does this adhere to? Or does your project have a DPG Alliance designation? And if you answer yes to either one of those things, we can send a link to the DPG website, or we can, get a direct link to which Sustainable Development Goals, or just have a list that we can reference. But yes, that is right. Thank you, Sachin. And that form generates this code.json that Sachin just linked to.
So generate this.
And if you scroll down to the bottom, Sean, the finished product, at the
Yep.
bottom, do you see all this extra stuff? Localization with an S is false. That's one of the fields from public code.yaml. It's not required by code.json, but we include it. And I think we could also include other optional fields at the bottom, like SDG goals or DPG status in our metadata. There's a long way of getting here, but that's what it would look like.
So yeah, basically the UN SDGs would be at this level, and then if there's like 8 of them or whatever, they would just get specified out in like sub JSON. It would be multiple name values.
Exactly. And we could constrain that in the form where it's like you pick which ones, and it would populate it with the correct values. The same way we do or like if you click on that form again, the same way we do for like the license or the usage type. We can just have them listed out, and you could check which one's off, and then it would just make sure that it goes into the right place, and it has the right stuff in it.
This form is designed just for federal government, US federal government, or it's for anyone?
So we could fork this and pass it the UN. We could create a new code.json generator out of this. The point of this was we passed it JSON configuration, so it generate whatever kind of form you want to. So if we come up with the questions we want to ask, we could use it to generate the kind of metadata for this use too. That was why the way we built it.
Okay, awesome. I love it. Yay, open source. Crushing it, Remy. Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I think one of the big questions that I have is, and this is also general, right? Unnecessarily related to the JSON file. When you pop the question, like as we looked at the DPG standard, the first question, what sustainable development goals does your project address? I think maintainer has been hit with that question. How do I figure that out? Because if you look at the DPG registry, it's really clear the projects are addressing SDGs, right? So if you be very practical, like a project like Python, how do I describe that, and how can we help maintainers to answer that question? So I think that's one of the big questions that I think we can think through together on how to guide maintainers to answer that question.
I think that's exactly right. I totally agree, Ruth. And I would offer that, we aren't the authority on what SDGs are being addressed, but the DPGA can be. And maybe instead of having all of the DPGA metadata reproduced, all we do is reference the DPGA and say, you know, um, here's where people have already gone through that process. So, but I'm not against also just listing them out explicitly as well. But I'm going to put an action item in the chat. Help come up with questions to help developers determine what SDGs their project might adhere to. So like under the same regime we're in right now, like Cookie Cutter or our web form site, we could have a questionnaire that's like, does your project help out with water quality? Or does your project help out with education? Or does your project, we could go through each of the SDGs and point to the specific 1.1, 1.2, 2.1, 2.2. Like we could turn that standard into a form that people can walk through. And then if you answer yes, we can be like, your project might apply to this one. It might apply to that one. And then like they can go in deeper and decide like whether or not it does. And
So,
maybe even
so effectively these 17 goals outlined here, we would have a yes, no for each of them. And then if they say yes, we might have sub questions. Is that what you're saying, Remy?
yes. Yes.
So these would each be items on the form that you click yes or no. And if you click yes, then you'd be asked for a bit more information possibly.
Yep. Exactly.
So we could fork your cookie cutter and create these questions, or yeah, okay.
Fork the code JSON generator. Yep. And we just put the questions into JSON and then those show up in a form.
Okay.
Could I say something? Sorry, I don't see the hand raised button here.
Yeah, jump in.
Sorry if I'm interrupting. Sorry, I couldn't. Um, uh, I believe what Ruth pointed out is sort of the key and really important thing that DPG struggles with themselves. And then what Remy said makes a lot of sense to have a sort of breakdown sub questions. What I think will be really important here is the current state of how their open source project can contribute to which SDG, and then aspirational. Like I can see this being used for SDG 3.2, whatever, like clean water. Because that's also the case with DPG. If you look at a lot of this digital public goods from more like technical perspective, a lot of them are CRM or some sort of database. You know, if I record like gender-based violence victims, then I'm contributing to something about the gender equality. If I'm like making note about the which well is broken in my water project, then I'm doing something about like water. But like technically it's the same CRM type of thing. And that's the case for a lot of DPGs there. So there, if we are really concerned about like the metric part, then I would like really highlight this is the current like state as is, and then what would be my aspirational contribution to which SDG sort of thing. And it's also a good way for project maintainers or whoever to sort of plug their project. Like I can see this being used for good things XYZ. And then that might be a very useful and meaningful thing on its own, getting people to think about how their project could contribute to which SDGs. Even
Yep.
though like yeah, like metric wise, we might never get the right thing. Because there will always be some other use cases for a database, for a language,
Right.
for a library.
So you're absolutely right. And this is why there are 2 or 3 different categories within the metadata for code inventory. There's a usage type, and there's a software type, and there's a platform type. So you can say like those things are what people can filter on. And then from that, you can be like, okay, I can see that this is a database that generically can do lots of different stuff. But there's also like standalone libraries and standalone websites. So people can filter and say, I'm looking for specifically web resources, or I'm looking for back-end resources or front-end resources. So because of the other metadata, that helps with identifying, not like it's one of those like CRMs or databases where it's just like a generic tool that can be used for whatever. So having the other metadata will help filter down, even if people identify like it could work for all the goals.
Are there additional things like is this research or is it, you know, a mature product that are captured as
Yep.
well?
Yeah, the maintainer field is one of those examples. So it's a little bit lower, Sean, where
Okay.
it says like whether it's an internally maintained, contract maintained, community maintained, it's up a little bit higher. Line number like 170 something. Yeah, 178.
Okay.
So right now, the maintenance field says whether or not it's internally maintained, contract maintained, community maintained, or not maintained at all. And then there's also other fields that exist that talk a little bit or try to speak to the level of maturity, whether it's like an alpha, a beta, or something like that. So those metadata fields exist in code JSON, and I think they also exist in public code.yaml. I'm not as familiar with code meta.json, but we'll continue to look at that one and see what the overlaps look like. Because
When I
we
was reading up on it, I think the focus of that might be more scientific research community, so it might already be scoped down at some level.
right. Yeah.
Okay, this is really cool. I have one thought. I really like this direction. I'm really nervous about putting like a bunch of requirements on. So, and I want to make it, I think we all agree we don't want to be in the auditing business. So DPG Alliance can continue to do that work, and we're just enabling them. And we're trying to keep our scope really small to the SDGs. So these other fields I think are extremely valuable, but maybe we're recommending people use them, but they're optional. They're not, you know, part of our,
That's the way we're
requirement.
approaching it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like we have mandated federal requirements, and then we have the optional fields for the ones that are like extra that will help us out. And we see a world where we want these inventories to be compatible with each other. It's like we would love to see a grand unified inventory of all public sector open source software on planet Earth, right? But if we're going to get there, we have to make sure that all these metadata standards contain no conflicting keys and, have all the, that they harmonize with each other. So that's the goal that we have. I don't know if that's like the right approach yet, right? Like we're early on in this. We're just moving forward and writing code and sharing it openly and working openly. Like we are thrilled to share this work with everyone. I know we've been doing a lot of talking in this meeting and appreciate everyone listening and contributing, but this is an open source project. Like we absolutely want people on this group who can look at the code or have other existing standards. Like I'm sure there's like library scientists and taxonomy people and other folks who've done inventories in other contexts who would have like some great ideas to bring to bear too. But this is what we've seen out in the public, and this is our best guess at a good way to approach it.
I have an idea. If other people don't have slightly changing this, but also just keeping this going as something concrete we could do from this. I'm putting a link. I haven't connected with Tobias Augsburger yet, but he's done a lot of work clearly identifying a whole bunch of open source projects that are doing climate action. So SDG 13. I think it's a couple hundred, maybe more projects. So it's a really good list he's built. I haven't seen how this compares to if any of these are DPG Alliance projects or not, or what. But I'd be curious to like work with him and try to go through these and see how we could enable them to at least identify that they are addressing SDG 13. And then kind of, go from there. I also am going to talk to people this afternoon. We have a hackathon at GW, and I wanted to see, it's a health-based hackathon, and I wanted to see if we could do a hackathon, get students to try to identify as many open source projects as they can that that address public health SDG issues. So yeah, I'm just thinking about how maybe we can start building a form and trying to bump the numbers and just get like that basic framework so we can start putting either YAML or something in these projects that the APIs can then start scraping. I want to talk to Jonathan Starr and see what he's on the API side. What does he want? I think he's really flexible. I think it could be a markdown README. It could be almost anything, but I like the idea of just trying to follow these standards and be interoperable as much as possible. So what do people think about going that direction? Blown away by the idea?
I think we've been talking at various levels of granularity about these files and how to pursue the information. And I think what you're suggesting is at the highest level, we look at the UN SDGs and decide when or how to incorporate them. But I suppose I am a little bit unsure what the question is at this point, because we've gone back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, I like to sort of learn by doing. So it's to me, we have this really nice set of somebody else has done the work to say these are, projects. They have way more detail. And I just want to make sure that all these projects, we kind of put them at least in the SDG 13 bin. And maybe they could go in many more, but when we start connecting with maintainers, we start understanding, what it would look like to talk to these projects and what are we going to ask of them? And maybe I'm getting the cart in front of the horse. Maybe we need to give them, the simple tool that Remy's team created but change it to answer those questions. But maybe this is a group that we could do what Ruth was talking about, apply that tool and test it out, kick the tires, see how it would work. Is that a project we could maybe do over the next 6 months and maybe shorter?
Yeah, maybe if I don't know, maybe we could articulate that in the notes here.
Or
I mean, I think the conceptual, I think the idea of aligning the acquisition of this information about UN SDGs inside one of these generated JSON files, possibly by using a JSON generating form like this, I think that is a good idea and something worth experimenting with. Is that kind of what you're suggesting, David?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But maybe taking it that next level of building out the questions that you would ask a maintainer about the relevancy of their project to the SDGs.
And so to accomplish that, I think, go ahead, Remy.
Yes, and I think we either look at code meta JSON or public code YAML to also get their questions added to it as well. Because like Ruth was saying, or like Cassie was saying earlier, getting information about what type of software it is and what level of maturity it is and what its users are and what its platforms are is just as important as knowing what the SDG it addresses is. Because then people can say, I want a library that specifically helps me with solar panels and tweaking them for their configurations or something versus I want a website that talks about solar energy, right? It's a big difference.
Yeah, plus that age-old problem of is this repository being maintained by anybody, or am I
Yeah.
about to waste my time on something that's dead and not gonna update the next version of my operating system?
We
Since
have
sorry.
ideas about that. Go ahead, Cassie.
Sorry, not having hands up button really is hard for me to jump in, knowing when to jump in. And since we're talking about the concrete to-dos now, like actions, which I really like, think another action that I think of is that which contributes to the overarching goal that we have is how to get people to projects to think of which SDG that they may contribute, like what their project may contribute. And looks like we want to work on sort of like questionnaire. And I'm hoping that this questionnaire can sort of inspire them. Like, oh, my project can actually do XYZ too. Oh, my project can be used to do many positive things, hopefully. Yeah. Um, yeah, happy to articulate that in the 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 doc as well.
Something I like that idea, Cassie. Like something that I think of on the chaos end. I think I shared this with David, like chaos practitioner guides. I have been looking at them most recently, and I can share a link of one. I'm not sure if this would be a good use case. Let me share an example of one. Contributor sustainability. For a community manager that wants to think about sustainability for their contributors, if they go through this, it kind of gives you like steps on how you can achieve this, right? So if we could have a guide like this, or it could also be a questionnaire, depends, that list out some practical steps that a maintainer would use to, it could even be, this would be a link to the cookie cutter, right? Like that's question there. If you want, before you answer this question, you can look at this resource to determine, either what state you are in, like Cassie said, or your aspiration to align with the SDGs, and like why that is also important as well. So we could either go but with like a guide. I think the guides are pretty interesting. Or have a question. I think we start with questions first. Then we could evolve it to either a guide.
I think this is a great place to capture the process that we're asking everybody to go through. This is great. I think we're still defining the process, so it's interesting to create a guide. But I mean, I see no reason why this guide can't be dynamic and change as the process changes. So yeah, I think this is great.
And just adding, really like Ruth's suggestion, because the reality is that the projects that's listed on DPGs are, let's say, not used widely in not non-profit community circle. Yeah,
Yep.
and then actually like some of the big projects that all the nonprofits I know use, or not just nonprofit governments and whatnot uses, like, because I just looked up, is Key Clock listed there? Because like, for example, it's something that people use like very much for identity management, like providing identity to people who don't have formal identity, not to banking and all those sort of thing. It's not. So I always like felt like there's kind of different categorization for this, and then for me, like aspirationally, I would love to see that merging more, but for more, let's say, industry standard open source projects to make it to the like tech for good space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I'm hoping that would raise the bar on documentation. Like yeah, like that sort of things.
Yeah, Remy?
Yes, and the metadata that we have is a good place where we can add more of that stuff, where we can say like, here are the partners who have used it, or here are the users of it. A pattern that we've seen in the communities like the Cloud Native Computing Foundation are they have like users listed in their projects where they say like these are the people that use it, and that's meant to encourage more adoption across the community. And the fundamental goal of having this inventory is to promote reuse. The whole point of creating this metadata is to surface which projects have already been built so that within the federal government, at least, we aren't reinventing things that are already there. And a lot of the things that are currently in the inventories, to your point earlier about like CRMs and databases, are the most mature products, right? They're the things that we've already paid for and already bought. So helping to get this inventory together, I believe will address some of that usage, and we can encourage metadata sharing about users, but like fundamentally an inventory will also address that problem directly too. That's the hope. That's why we're doing all the work.
I love it. I love the yes ands too.
So I feel like there are some things that we've discussed that we didn't quite capture in the minutes yet, and I'm not sure specifically how to articulate them. Or have we articulated what you just said, Remy?
No, I don't think I wrote that specific thing down anywhere. I can try and write down what I just said though.
Okay.
Yeah, I took some notes too. I think we're honing in on some actions. They're still a little bit vague. But maybe, you know, if people have like specific, really narrow ideas, they can definitely add them to the issues in the GitHub.
I did that. I got that as a comment. So the idea of like forking the code JSON and creating questions to help people decide which development goal they are associated with. I think I did an okay job capturing that. It could be a little bit clearer. I was, in the middle of a meeting, but at least
You're a very good multitasker. One more minute. Anybody have any last final thoughts? I really appreciate this discussion today.
Sorry, one revelation that I just had. Just one, like, I guess a lot of these projects, even on DPG, like how we measure something's good is either this is used by organizations that's supposedly contributing to SDGs, or the project itself contributes to SDGs somehow. I think I just had an epiphany. Then it's a bit easier to categorize from there, right? Like, yeah,
those are two very concrete metrics to start with. I totally agree,
yes.
Cassie.
Yeah, me too. Because like I can say so many ways in which the Chaos Project is doing good. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's either you promote like organizations that's made to support SDGs. So these are all the NGOs, NPOs, and hopefully governments in the world, even though that's debatable. Um, so it's like looking at adoptions by certain actors, and then another is the project itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We'll end there.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
take it, bye.